Kannanthanam is presenting on the homily of Narsai on the great marriage feast. Some reflections.
In this matter, I am concentrating on one of the memory of Narsai. Probably the next most famous Greek poet after Saint Ephraim, equal with Jacob of Saru. This homily is on the dedication of the church, and it is numbered as the 33rd one in the collections of Alphonse Mingana. The early Syriac writers always tried to reveal the content of faith and theology through signs, symbols, and imageries. For example, many early Syriac works, like the 42 Odes of Solomon, expressed an ecstatic love for God using the imagery of a sacred wedding, an image foreign to Hellenistic thought. The Syriac fathers always look on marriage in a Christological and eschatological point of view. Christ as a heavenly bridegroom and church as his bride dominates much of the early Syriac literature. In this homily, Narsai demonstrates the whole economy of God culminated in the Christ event in the context of a marriage feast. Narsai uses nuptial imagery as a type of divine human relationship. The nuptial imagery is a common biblical theme widely used to demonstrate the divine human relationship. Syriac Christianity makes wider use of this imagery, imbibing much inspiration from its Old Testament legalistic and prophetic orientations, as well as from its New Testament symbolic and eschatological connotations. According to prophets, Israel became bride of God through the covenant made on Sinai. In the New Testament, Christ calls himself the bridegroom directly. So in Matthew chapter 9, verse 50. And by allusions, all those who believed in him, and particularly the disciples of Christ, are called groomsmen or friends of the bridegroom. The early Syriac ascetics called Christ Hasana, bridegroom, signifying their intimate relationship with him. They looked forward to full communion with their beloved at the eschatological nuptial banquet, Meshtuta, and finally in the heavenly bridal chamber, Winona. Narsai says that Christ the bridegroom, by his great love, lowered his greatness and wished to unite the mortals and to elevate them. I quote from the homily: Christ the bridegroom, by his great love, lowered his height, and he wished to unite the mortals and to elevate them. Lord of the height lowered his height towards the earthly one and became a bridegroom to the unclean Gentiles and sanctified them. Church of the Gentiles betrothed to the bridegroom, son of the height. And he united her with his love, raised her head among her enemies. The exiled, abandoned, shattered, and humiliated one became the wife of the heavenly Son who dwells in the highest. Some important themes Narsai highlights in this homily. I am taking. The first one is election of Gentiles as the people of God in the place of the people of Israel. According to Narsai, God chose and loved the daughter of Gentiles instead of the daughter of Zion, who hated his union. The synagogue crucified and the church of Gentiles lived on his cross, and she enjoys his body and his blood which atoned her debt. The quote, exalt, O daughter of Gentiles, instead of the daughter of Zion. Because behold, Christ the King comes to you, and he gardens you. In his just, right, and humble love is filled with salvation, and he loves you instead of the Hebrew woman who hated his union. Another quotation: the synagogue went out because she hated the bridegroom, whom she was betrothed, and the church entered and became the bride of his true love. The synagogue crucified, and the church of Gentiles lived on his cross, and behold, she enjoys his body and his blood, which atones debts. Another theme: Christ's baptism of Jordan was his betrothal to the church. Narsai says that Christ loved and wanted lost daughter of the Gentiles and purified her through the water of baptism. I quote: the noble one betrothed the naked and insolent one, and made her modest with his brightness, and covered his disgrace with his robe of glory. The Holy One chose the companion of demons and made servant of devils, and he shadowed her his love and washed out from her great iniquities. He saw her obscure and laden with dust, and he hated her appearance. He brought her down to water and purified and cleansed her from defilement. One ablution, which is filled with life, set her right. He washed and purified her. He cleansed her face from vices. With living water, he washed her filth of defilement. He poured out holy oil on her head, gladdened her face. With oil and water, he washed her body and cleansed her soul, and he put a name for her, Holy Church filled with beauty. He stripped from her the name of hatred and vice, and he clothed her beauty, and he put her name, Chosen Church. Narsai again describes about the naming, adornment, and beautification of the bride that is taking place at the time of baptism. The prophets, I quote, the prophets, the just, put her name in great church. The bridegroom came and confirmed her name in the baptism. He purified her with water. He signed her with oil. He poured out her with his love. He took the garment of light and clothed her solemnly. He sealed the bride in his loving name, and in the name of his Father and of the Holy Spirit, and perfected her spiritual beauty. He put on her honorable head, crown of light, and he brought his body for her, and he mixed his blood and gladdened her heart. By his passion, he freed her. By his murder, he saved her. By his resurrection, poured out for her spiritual life. He weaved a bridal chamber for her by the rays of the light of his Father. And the life-giving one invited the worlds and generations for her marriage feast. Another theme: the bride price paid by Christ to the church. The dowry paid by Christ to his bride is his own body and blood. The marriage gifts given by the apostles, the groomsmen, were passions and deaths that suffered from the oppressors on account of her. The prophets put their revelations for the sake of her. Martyrs put for her the blood of their neck lovingly. Priests came and put their orders of the temple. The kings gave her their authorities as gifts. Men and women, old and young, and men of all ranks took and offered to her chance of glory as gifts. Narsai says, I quote, behold, the dowry of the bride of light is on her lips, the body and blood of the living bridegroom, the Son of the highest. Also apostles, the groomsmen, gave her their marriage gifts, passions, and deaths they suffered from the oppressors on account of her. Another theme: Christ's death on the cross as his union with the church. Narsai calls the church as bride of crucifixion. Yeta kalza the skifuza. He asks, which bridegroom suffered cross for the bride except Christ, because of his unspeakable great love? Which is the bride who loved the bridegroom who hanged on the cross, except the church, whose story is great in words. The love of the bridegroom towards the bride he faced fastened on the cross. The love of the bride after bridegroom the cross longed. Another thing, Christ prepares a bridal chamber in heaven. According to Narsai, Christ set a bridal chamber in heaven for the church, and promised blessings are set in it without end. He writes, "You are blessed, O church, because behold, your bridal chamber is set up in heaven, and the promised blessings are set in it without end." Eucharist, the foreshadow of the great marriage feast in heaven. According to Narsai, Eucharist is a foreshadow of the great marriage feast that is to be held in heaven. He says, "Great marriage feast, Christ the bridegroom and church the bride. The participants are apostles, prophets, martyrs, priests, and the kings. All the peoples of the world and generations took their places at the marriage feast. All of them delight in the body and blood of Christ the bridegroom. The body of the bridegroom is the living food in the marriage feast of his church, and his blood is the spiritual grain in his banquet. This is a great marriage feast in which all the worlds are sitting, and in which the heavenly congregations are waiting upon to minister. This is a living marriage feast because life flows between its rows, and the participants bring new life with the bridegroom mingles. The guests invited to the marriage banquet. Many guests are invited to the heavenly wedding banquet to share the joy and happiness of the bride and bridegroom. Narsai says, "He summoned generations and whole races for the living marriage feast, and he made them recline before the daughter of the king, the holy bride. He invited prophets, the just, bride apostles, priests, kings, and slain martyrs for the marriage feast of the holy church. Great marriage feast, Christ the bridegroom and church the bride. The guests are apostles, prophets, martyrs, priests, and kings." Food served in the marriage feast. According to Narsai, the body of the bridegroom is the living food, and his blood is the spiritual drink. This is a great marriage feast in which all the worlds are sitting, and in which the heavenly congregations are waiting upon. Great singers. Narsai also mentions the great singers of the marriage feast. The invitees sing untiringly the beauty of the bridegroom. They extol the holy crown with their praises. The songs of the human were mixed with the angels. The house of the feast was filled with spiritual songs. The chief of the singers, King David, carried the harp. He plays and sings blessings of the church and beauty of the bridegroom. Isaiah stood and began to cry out that Emmanuel is the bridegroom whom the church loved. Jacob the elder gave a song saying that this is a bridegroom whom all the just expected. All the prophets also sing the beauty of the bridegroom. So we consider as a whole the homily of Narsai. We can see a close parallelism between the theme of this homily and that of the East Sicilian liturgy of marriage. The theme of Christ and church is dominant in the marriage rite of the East Sicilian church. As a matter of fact, the liturgical text seems to be more concerned with the betrothal of Christ and his church than with the actual marriage of person in concern. In the ceremony, alternating with the actual marriage ceremony of the two individuals involved is the picture of marriage of Jesus and the church. This picture is interwoven with the ceremony that at some point you will actually wonder what exactly is going on. The two couples are lost, and the liturgy goes on with the adoration of Christ as the bridegroom of the church. The comparison goes far beyond the external parable. Jesus came to the earth and he selected a daughter of the Gentiles as his bride. He fell in love with her. He paid the price of redemption by his blood on the cross of Calvary. As Narsai says in this homily, He brought her down to water and purified and cleansed her from defilement. One ablution which is filled with life set her right. It's interesting that on the eve of the marriage, both in the house of the bride and bridegroom of the Syrian Christians, there are special functions of decorating the bride and the groom. These beautifying functions are preceded by a solemn ceremonial bath. The nuptial union of Christ with the church preceded by a nuptial bath. This reference is to the baptism of Jesus in the river Jordan, where the Holy Spirit hovered over him when the Father gave testimony. Before the betrothal, the church was covered with dirt, impurity, and wounds. This alludes to the state of mankind after the fall and of Israel before the advent of Christ. Before her marriage, the church was washed and purified of her stain and sinfulness in the baptismal waters of the river Jordan. Thus purified and made her holy, so that she might be a worthy partner for Christ. In Ezekiel chapter 15, verse 8 to 9, we find that God bathed Israel with water, washed and anointed her with oil before he entered into a covenant with her. Christ the bridegroom washes the feet of his friends before he makes a new covenant with them. So this washing is a separation of the covenant. It's a preparation of the covenantal relationship in marriage. In the order of the blessing of the vestment, priest prays, Son of God, make a great banqueting room for his betrothed church. I quote this from Dharmo's text of marriage. Son of God made a great banqueting room for his betrothed church and pitched her bridal chamber on Mount Sinai with great solemnity. He summoned prophets and invited apostles, teachers, and shepherds for the day of her wedding feast. Exalted watchers were the cooks. They brought manna, flesh, and quail to be her childish food. By Moses he betrothed her, and by John he wrote her marriage contract in the river Jordan. King David ministered her banquet by composing hymn and chants. The solemn wedding of Christ with the church is poetically expressed here. In the betrothal service, when a cup of wine is brought, the priest prays, exult and rejoice, O faithful church, daughter of the kings of the world. In the bridegroom who has espoused you and made you enter to his bridal chamber, and instead of dowry he gave you his precious body and blood, and through the sacrifice of himself absolved you, sanctified you, and made you a bride adorned for him, and mixed inside you a spiritual ring for all your children. This dowry in Syrian there are three terms which signifies Mahara, bridal price, Parnisa, dowry, Rumiana, gifts. Christ paid his church Mahara, that is the bridal price, which is legally it is binding to give Mahara by the bridegroom to the bride. It is a practice in the East Syrian church, also in the Jewish tradition. Here, Christ paid the maximum price, his own life, to the church, his bride. I conclude my paper. Narsai, in his homily on the dedication of the church, describes the final dedication of the church in the context of a great marriage feast which is taking place among the Jews. Here, Narsai takes marriage as a symbol which signifies the permanent relationship between Christ and the church. He says that the exiled, abandoned, shattered, and humiliated one became the wife of the heavenly Son who dwells in the highest. Through giving his body and blood as dowry, he proved his closeness and inseparable relation with the church. Through his self-immolation on the cross of Calvary, he cleansed and perfected her. Christ, the bridegroom, desires that his spouse should be always with him, so he prepared a bridal chamber for her in heaven. This theme is very much reflected in the Syrian marriage liturgy, which commemorates the solemn wedding of Christ with the church throughout his prayers and rituals. Thank you.
Thank you, Father John Kannanthanam. You have made a very clear presentation on the theology of marriage in Narsai. As all of you know, Narsai belongs to the East Syrian tradition. But when you look at the theology of marriage, particularly the liturgy of marriage in the West Syrian tradition, all these poetic, metaphorical images are there. So I am wondering, there is a common source from Narsai in the Eastern tradition and the fathers in the West Syrian tradition.
Just this family can be of marriage, of dedication of the church, and of the season of Kudashita, which will be the context of this actual homily, not the explanation, but the homily.
I think it is context is dedication of the church.
Of the Kudash of the church or the Kudashita of the season. Season.
Common source. Of course, there is common source. I think Narsai and Jacob's both belong to the school of Edessa. I think they have common source, especially Marafre gives so much theology. This nuptial used very much nuptial more than maybe Marafre is a common source for this tradition.
Regarding about the view of Narsai with regard to the sacrament of marriage and just what great significance logically it is thousand. But my question is that as we are Christians and we do now prime importance for preparing the couples, marriages and so on than before. Premarital courses are conducted everywhere, but this much significance this marriage has got, whether these couples are being aware or taught in the premarital course, that's what I want to know, and these couples are to be prepared in this way from the church fathers' teachings, as you mentioned.
What's a person giving preparation for marriage, preparation course in paradises, but as far as I know, no such things are given to them.